pro side of DRIPA, why it would be such a great idea. And then the election intervened, and now we have our not pro DRIPA event. You will know that our committee operates kind of like journalism. We're not here to tell you what to think. We're here to present you with the information that you need. Can you not hear me? Yeah, anyway, we're trying to present both sides, and this is the other side. And personally, I think this is an important issue because DRIPA is being experimented on the people from Pender Harbour. And when they finish with Pender Harbour, if they ever do, then they'll be coming here next. So it's a good idea to inform yourself about this stuff because while there were a lot of pro stuff that was presented on May 7th, there's some other stuff too. And for those of you who have bad memories about the May 7th event, we put all of the presentation from May 7th on our Facebook page, and we'll be putting this one up on our Facebook page as well, so you can compare and contrast and come to your own decision.
Thank you, Neil. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Sean McAllister, and I'm a director of the Pender Harbour and Area Residents Association, and I have been a director of theirs for a number of years. Tonight, I was hoping to split up my talk into 3 different parts. The first part would be perhaps explaining to you our experience negotiating with the government over our dock management plan, and if I say DMP throughout this meeting or presentation, that's the dock management plan. And I'm hoping that would take us a little less than half hour. And then I thought we could have a break because you're not going to want to listen to me for more than half an hour at one go. And then after that, I thought we could then have a discussion on, or give you a presentation on UNDRIP and DRIPA, and how we came to the conclusion that our only option was to commence a legal proceeding in order to attest that legislation for its constitutionality. So, and then the third part of my presentation will be questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on this. And it's complicated, and I think we all need to do some homework. If you haven't done it before, I think we all need to do homework and educate ourselves as to what's going on in our country and in this province. And because it's my view that the government is on a mission here, and they're hiding in plain sight. They're proceeding with the implementation of DRIPA. They've been doing it for the last 5 years, and if you look it up, there's reams of documents online explaining how DRIPA is going to be implemented in British Columbia. So just a bit of an introduction as to who I am. I've got a political science degree and a law degree from the University of Alberta. I graduated in 1981, and I was called to the bar, the BC bar, in 1982, but I returned to Alberta and practiced there from 1982 until I retired in 2012. Upon my retirement, my wife and I, we eventually settled. This is not my wife, this is my good friend and helper, savior this afternoon, as it turns out. We purchased a home and a waterfront home, actually, and a dock, which was the primary reason for moving to Pender Harbour. It wasn't the art galleries and the fine dining and the opera that we all find in Pender Harbour. It was actually the docks and the fishing and those kinds of things. So, and I've been voting in the Pender Harbour area since about 2007. So, prior to coming out to British Columbia, I didn't do any Indigenous law. I was with a small firm, and I did their litigation court work. This eventually morphed into family law and divorce practice, which led me very quickly to an early retirement. So I didn't really go to law school and do all those things to separate people, and I wasn't enjoying it. So I retired early and off to the West Coast it was. So by 2014, I was nicely set up to enjoy my retirement. I had a sailing boat, I had a fishing boat, and I was cruising the coastal waters, and I pretty much felt, having moved from the cold prairies to here, that I had died and gone to heaven pretty much. And then this all changed within a year when I received a call from either Len Lee, who's here, or Bob Fielding, who said that the government was coming out with a new dock management plan. And would I have a look at it as the token lawyer for the group, just to have a look-see and see what it was all about? And so I said, sure. And so that's kept me busy for the last decade. So a little history about our dealings with the government and the dock management plan. You might find it boring, but I think if you do enter into negotiations or discussions or consultation with the government, you might learn something and learn from our experience with that, and be aware of the pitfalls and what the governments will try and do. So anyway, I hope you are able to use some of this information to your benefit. So I think the next slide gives a bit of a breakdown. I'm not going to read through that, but it gives us a bit of a summary as to what went on over the years. In 2015, a year after we moved to Pender Harbour, I'm not sure if you've heard it here, but we hear about it all the time even now. There was a disastrous town hall meeting organized by the government to talk about their brand new dock management plan. Prior to this dock management plan being brought out or trotted out, there had been a 10-year moratorium in Pender Harbour for any new dock applications. So no one was getting a new dock application. If you had an existing dock, they would renew it, but there were no new docks permitted. For 10 years, for a decade. No reason why, just a moratorium. At this meeting, there were many mistakes made by the government in how the meeting was structured and held, and unfortunately we had a few boisterous and vocal and disruptive attendees from Pender Harbour there, the meeting didn't go well. It really didn't go well. And again, if you're going to have a town hall with opposing views, you have to be careful about how you structure them and how they're done. So the government since then has refused to do any town hall meetings in Pender Harbour. so we've given up that benefit, I suppose. So anyways, the draft dock management plan that they put forward in 2015 was a disaster. It really demonstrated that the government had no idea what they were doing. They implemented zoning in the harbour, so there was a red zone and a green zone and a purple zone, and I think another couple of other colors that all meant different things. They talked about light penetration, and they mandated certain size restrictions on these docks. To say that it wasn't well received is an understatement, and I was at the meeting, and I remember some of the questions being asked, and one of the key points for us, at least, is we said, well, you're going to have all these zones in the harbor. Like the red zone was basically, if you lived in that red zone, which I don't know if you're familiar with Pender Harbour, but it's up Gunboat Bay or Oyster Bay, depending on who you talk to and which side of the bay you're on. If you were up there, you were not going to be allowed to have a dock up there ever. Don't even ask. And if you have a dock up there, it's going to have to come out. And there were quite a number of docks up there that actually had tenures. So I believe the threat was that as soon as your tenure was over, then they would want you to remove the dock. And so the question to the government at that time was, well, what do you base all this on? Like, where is all this coming from? What about this red zone? And they said, well, they had science to back all of this up, and they knew what they were doing, and just follow along, right? So we insisted on them producing their science. Well, as it turns out, they didn't have any science. They had well, I don't know what I've said this later in my presentation, but to this day, we do not have any scientific or rational explanation for the zoning in Pender Harbour. Nothing. Zero. We don't even have a reason given to us from the Shishalh Nation. Basically, the zones are there and we're not talking about them. So, live with it. So because of the backlash from the community, back in 2015, the government hired a smart guy by the name of Barry Penner. You see him on TV, he's always working for some government organization. He was an former attorney general for the province at one time. And they hired him to do an investigation and prepare a report on his findings. And he did a pretty good report. And his findings were pretty well received by the community. But his recommendations were essentially ignored by the government. The only one that they picked up was that they wanted $1,000 each from us, more or less as a damage deposit, to make sure we didn't leave a mess when they yanked our dock out. They were quick to grab on that, so we all had to pay in another $1,000. So one of Penner's suggestions is, hey, why don't you get some science that you said you have? You don't have any science backing up backing up this plan of yours. Like, why don't you do an investigation? So they did they ordered two scientific studies, one an environmental study, and they also did an archaeological study. So we had limited funds. We didn't have we weren't able to have people go diving and what have you, but what we did is we had another environmental firm critique their report. And essentially, they found that there was once again, no scientific explanation for the zones in Pender Harbour. So, it's not there. I mean, they saw animals here, there, and everywhere. And the report really didn't progress us any further on this. But I certainly felt that it was an attempt by the government to reverse engineer. They knew the result they wanted, and so they went out and got a report to support the dock management plan. But they didn't do a very good job of it. The archaeological study came back, and it's pretty simple. It just basically said that they came to the conclusion that there was not 1 square inch of the harbor that could be ruled out as potentially having a significant, being archaeologically significant. So not 1 square inch. So you couldn't say, well, you don't have to dig here, or you do have to dig here, or if you dig there, or you want to, pretty much if you wanted to do anything on the foreshore, you're going to need an archaeologist to come and tell the world that there were no significant archaeological findings there. So even currently now, if you're going to dig in Pender Harbour, it's recommended that you obtain a preliminary field recognizance, a PFR, and in some instances you're ordered to have one. And so essentially, if you want to dig, you're looking at hiring an archaeologist. And unfortunately, the number of archaeologists that are available and willing to come and talk to you about this are limited. Primarily on the Sunshine Coast where we are, it's in situ, and you're stuck with them, more or less. On one occasion, I tried to get a young archaeologist up and said, well, I'd like, being a lawyer, and I've had my share of lawsuits, I wanted an expert that would maybe give a different view of the world. But this young archaeologist I spoke to said, well, no, you should use in situ because they know all of the teachings of the Shishalh Nation, and they know what's going on, and they know all the history and what have you. And all I wanted her to do was look at the front foreshore and say, is there anything archaeologically significant here that we have to protect? And they said, well, they weren't prepared to get involved. So anyways, I digress. So this dock management stayed in place. We were successful in getting some minor amendments made to it over time, they never came through with pulling out the docks in the red zone that had tenure. They did eventually rip out docks that had never applied for tenure. And again, some of the folks in Pender Harbour said, well, they never had tenure, they never applied, they asked for permission, and so it's right, they should come out of there, right? Well, wrong, because the government would not accept an application for tenure. For the 10-year moratorium, you couldn't, even if you applied, they wouldn't take your application. And for the time after that, they wouldn't accept it either. So it was unfair to these people. They tried, or they could have tried, but it was impossible for you to get tenure. And so those are the folks that were, I think there was about 3 or 4 docks that were pulled out last year or the year before. So during this time, from 2015 up until 2025, during this time, I was on the committee dealing with it, and we were given 1 2-hour Zoom meeting with the government and the Shishalh Nation to discuss our concerns with the dock management plan. And of course, that, you know how those meetings go. Everybody's got to introduce themselves, and then you all have to get the lecture about being respectful. And then by the time we finished all that, we probably had about an hour where we could actually deal with the issues. And we were unable to get through our list of problems or concerns with the dock management plan. And that was too bad. According to the government, they were not prepared to meet with us again. And we'd written them a number of times asking to meet again. So from the first plan in 2015 until the one they brought up in 2023, we got this 2-hour consultation with them, and that was that. And I guess we should have been happy about that, or happy with that. In 2018, I should go back just when that 2015, that first dock management plan came out. There was absolutely no consultation with any of the dock owners, boaters, fishermen, guides, marinas. None of those people were consulted on what should or should not go into that plan. So then in 2018, I think that the government signed a foundation agreement with the First Nations, and it provided that the Shishalh Nation was to get some land. They were paid $33 million, and the shared decision-making regime was introduced. So when you're dealing with this a topic, there's a huge difference between a shared decision-making process and a joint decision-making process. In the foundation agreement that came out in 2019, it was shared. And what that meant was the government would appoint, say, 3 people on a working table. The Shishalh Nation would appoint 3 people onto the working table as well. That'd be an equal representation. They would then make recommendations and what have you, and go up the ladder. So it was shared, and however, the foundation agreement said that the government retained the statutory decision-making power. So they had the hammer. At the end of the day, if the government wanted to make a decision that they couldn't come to terms with the Shishalh Nation, they still could. I'm not aware of any of those decisions that were made like that, but at least they held the power to do so. So that's what they introduced at that time. And then, again, I might be going too much into docks, but the government then started granting new permissions, letting people to apply for new docks, so long as they complied with the best management practices that were in place that time, which included, I don't want to get too technical, but light penetration and a certain size and all those kinds of things. However, the people like me who had docks that have been in the water, they said, well, you can keep your dock in the water, but you're going to have to bring it up to code when your lease runs out. So basically they kicked the can down the road for about 5 years until everyone's tenure ran out, and then at that time we were all going to have to be in a situation where we were going to have to reconfigure our docks and bring them to within these new specifications. The problem is that the new standards were really unworkable for most dock owners. The docks were only allowed to be, I think, 8 feet wide. And as we were getting closer to these deadlines, the government could see that many of the things that were listed in the dock management plan were unworkable, and so they came up with a new plan. I would point out also that there were a number of people that didn't comply with the dock management plan, and they seemed to get a blight from the government. So it didn't seem to be any certainty. It just seemed to be, well, this person just put that dock in. It's like 5 times the size that it should be under the regulations, and he got approval. There just didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to what was going on. So I think what was happening is that everybody's tenure was coming closer and closer, and we were all going to have to mess with our docks to bring them up, or they were going to have to make exceptions on everybody. And so what they thought that they would do is come up with a new dock management plan. Well, that went from bad to worse, and I concluded that they were either totally incompetent or just didn't care, or were trying to get back at us for some reason, maybe for that first initial town hall meeting, I don't know. And I'm reminded of an old adage or a rule of thumb that says, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. And so I determined that perhaps they just didn't get it. But some of the things that came out in this most recent dock management plan were boathouses were banned throughout the province, not just us. They widened the scope of this dock management plan. There were ridiculous size restrictions imposed. It applied to all docks, including freshwater docks. But then I think after about a week or two after that, they put a pause on that and said, oh geez, we forgot to get some science that would back that up. So they said, okay, you lake people, you're okay for now. We'll have to go get a scientific report that'll back up our, but you can guarantee that's coming. That's coming. So the new plan applied to commercial docks. It applied to the entire SWIA of what they call it at the Inland Sunshine Coast. So the entire SWIA would be the territory of the Shishalh Nation. So one example but then it started to change and move. And one example of this is that they kind of relented on the boathouse thing, and they said, well, no, Sean, you can't have a boathouse at the end of your dock. That would be bad. But we'll let the marina down there, they can have 40 boathouses, and so long as they're clustered together. And I'm going, well, how the heck does that make any sense that I couldn't have a boathouse? If they're bad, you would think that one boathouse at the end of my dock would be not so bad, but 40 boathouses in a bay or somewhere would be, if they were so bad, you would think that would be terribly bad for the ecology there. They don't explain that to us, but there was that. There's no rationale, no environmental studies, and then you know, the way it was worded, it appeared as though you were required to put light penetration rates over the floats. So I'm not sure, again, I might be getting too technical, but the light penetration would be the surface of your float, and it would be over your float. Well, why would you have light penetration over a float? You can't see through the float, so there would be small strips of an area where you could see water actually underneath your dock, but for the most part you couldn't. But the way it was worded, it seemed to us that you were required to have this light penetration material, which is extremely expensive over the entire surface of the dock. So there were a lot of problems, and so various groups were formed last year. The Lakes group was one of them. The WPC was another. We had some various yellow signs that went up. An advisory group was formed by the government in 2024. Our correspondence with the government over our participation in that advisory group was on our website, And what we wanted was confirmation that if we were going to participate in this advisory group, that we wanted the issue of the Section 7 issue on the agenda, and we wanted that in writing. And we could never get the government to agree or confirm that they would discuss that. We went back and forwards. This isn't quite in order, but one of the things that they initially said to us, they based this new dock management plan on an engineering report, and they basically said, well, when we do our consultation, we're not going to. So we're just going, well, why are we having this consultation if you're not even going to talk about the basis upon which you trotted this thing out? So eventually they relented on that. The other thing that we had asked for is that we wanted to do it in public, so we wanted to have our members to be able to tune in online, have perhaps a Zoom conference. I'm sure everybody's been to one of these before. You would all could come online. You wouldn't participate, but you could at least hear what the government was telling us, and you could see us at work, because quite frankly, we were getting a bad rap because we were doing our hardest and doing whatever it is we could, and I thought it would be good for the public to see exactly what we were going through when we were dealing with the government. But we were told, no, they used a danger issue. They said that it's too dangerous. And I'm going, what do you mean it's too dangerous? This prevents me from spinning what it is that went on. I mean, this would be exactly your words going directly to our members, but they would not agree to that either. So anyways, so the warning for government consultation is this, is that if you do happen to be in a situation where you do get an invite to consult, do not think that you are pretty important. You get an invitation, you think you're important, then they will tell you, well, here's the agenda, we're not going to talk about anything else, we're going to tell you the time that we're going to allow this to go, and as well as the time period for the public engagement. There'll be no feedback or back and forth, just thanks for coming out and a pat on the back. And one of the examples was that this latest dock management plan came out and was presented to the board at the SCRD, and the board at that time passed a unanimous resolution to extend the public engagement period to May. So we have our local government saying, look, you can't give these people 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We need until May to get back to you. It was unanimous, and it was done on that day, and they ignored that. So anyways, if you're asked to consult with the government, you must ensure that this is not just a box-ticking exercise so that they can move past you, saying that they have completed their consultation with you. Otherwise, they will manage and muzzle you and tick the box and publicize the narrative, and you will look like you are in agreement with everything that's been done. So you have to be very careful, and you have to get things in writing with them. Don't fall into the trap of just yes and cooperation and what have you. I think you have to set your terms of reference and tell them what you need to discuss, and don't stand for nonsense. You know, I mean, sometimes a non-participation is sometimes better, because the last thing you want to do is to be brought in and muzzled, and then you're seen as being someone who supported or even put together the plan that they've eventually come out with. Assuming you're not happy with it. I mean, if you're happy with it, then so be it. In 2021, we realized the dock management plan was important, but there was a major threat, in my view, coming our way to the use of our waterfront and the use of Crown land. And I believe there's a major threat to our democracy and how we're going to be governed in the future. So slide 21, or the next one, I guess. Next slide. Yes, so basically this is when, in 21, the government said that they were going to begin negotiations with the Shishalh Nation under Section 7 of DRIPA to negotiate a Section 7 agreement to jointly make decisions on docks. So this is the old shared versus joint. So joint, and I'll hit it later, but joint means you both have to agree, and it means that the government is not keeping back their statutory authority anymore. They're sharing it with the First Nation. So we became very, very concerned about that. We retained counsel, and 2 years ago, we sent a letter asking 21 questions of the government as to how this was all going to work. How are you going to make this work? The major threat was coming from the government proceeding to negotiate Section 7. We concluded that even if we negotiated the perfect dock management plan, even if we got all the boathouses we wanted and everything we wanted, the problem is that if you gave the Shishalh Nation a veto, or even the government for that matter, a veto, there would be no certainty, because these things all have to be renewed. It's not like you get a tenure that lasts forever. It's every 5 years, or every 3 years, or it's every 2 years, and there's no certainty there either. But so, if you're going, and you have to apply again, right? And if you're going to make these decisions joint, what is to stop either government or the Shishalh Nation from saying no? And all you need is, you need to get both of them to agree. So, currently, we're in a situation where, just to show you how bad it is, we had that moratorium, and we've had these 2 dock management plans. I know of at least one person, and maybe 2, who have been waiting over 20 years for a tenure for their dock. And I'll tell you one of my best friends, okay? This isn't me. He's an Air Force pilot. He basically risked his life for the country. He had to retire early for health reasons. He has a dock up in the red zone, and he's been applying for his dock for over 20 years. When he started, he was in his 50s, and he's now in his 70s, and he still hasn't got his tenure. He eventually went ahead and built one, so he's got one of those docks that he doesn't have any tenure for, and he's been at risk for having it ripped down. And so far they haven't taken him on that, but that's how ridiculous it is. Just recently, they're publishing some further applications for docks, and those are the applications that they've received in 2006. So they're, I don't know how many years, my math isn't that good up here, but it's a long time. So, it's not good up there. The other thing too is that some of the media would tell you that the new dock management and the grandfathering, they've come up with this grandfathering scheme, has made everything go away. Well, I will tell you that there is grandfathering. We think, of course, the permissions that they give you can be revoked at any time, without reason, and if they do so, you are prevented from suing them. We still have zones that we have no idea what they are. If you are going to put a new dock in, you have to comply with these new ridiculous size restrictions that don't make sense if you have a boat over 25 feet long, and so on. So they've grandfathered us to some, I hope, but it's still not a happy thing. So there you go. That's the dock thing. I thought maybe we'd take 5 minutes, and I don't know how long I've taken, but take 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll deal with UNDRIP and DRIPA.